So in this chapter, we're going to be talking about wire gauges. And what I mean by gauge is the thickness of the wire. So this right here, this is 12 gauge wire. And you can see it's a little, it's pretty beefy stuff. And then right here, we have 18 gauge wire. It's very thin, very small. To make life easy for yourselves, the biggest ones you're gonna wanna use is 2 gauge to connect your batteries together. You're gonna wanna use 4 gauge for maybe running to your ACR or your alternator. So that way, when your vehicle is running, you can, your whole battery system charges. So 4 or 2 gauge, those are the 2 you're gonna wanna use. And when in doubt, just use a bigger cable, use bigger wire. It's the safest way to go about it. Make sure everything is fused properly. There shouldn't be any wires that are just wire to battery. You always wanna fuse all your wires. So that's a super crucial piece. And again, 12 gauge and 18 gauge is pretty much everything you need to put everything together in your van. And then for higher amp draw, to keep things simple, we use 12 gauge for anything we know we're gonna be putting a lot of power through, and then 18 gauge for pretty much every light. Lights typically don't take very much power. It's a low amp draw, so we use the thinner stuff. One thing we do this is like a marine grade. There's 2 wires sheathed inside a nice protective coating, and that stuff's important. It makes it look really, really clean, and it also protects this stuff from getting cut. Because if you cut this and it starts shorting out, you're gonna have a buried wire issue and you're just gonna be popping fuses, and you want everything to work well. Just get a big spool of 18 gauge and 12 gauge, and that should pretty much be everything you need. So 12 gauge to run your refrigerator, to run your Webasto or your heater. If you don't gauge big enough, a lot of the times the component just won't work. But you also can pose the problem of creating a fire hazard if it's not fused properly as well. So keep those kind of things in mind. Look at your devices, see how much wattage they pull or amperage the device pulls, and make sure you gauge accordingly. We'll attach an amperage table onto this lesson because, all of these kind of amperages and stuff, they change with the length of the wire, so you kind of need to get a good idea of how long the wire is going to be, how big it needs to be able to transfer that power down the length of wire. The longer the wire gets, the more amperage drop and voltage drop that you have. So if you have too thin of a wire, it's like, a pipe for water. If you have a tiny little straw and you're trying to take a shower with it, you're not gonna have enough pressure, you're not gonna have enough water. So kind of a general principle, kind of help you guys understand how this whole thing works. But when in doubt, just use bigger wire. You can't ever really go wrong with that. It might cost a little bit more, but that's probably the safest way to go about it. And the bigger the wire, the more easily electricity can transfer through that length of cable. Later on in the course, we're going to be going in depth with the electrical system and the electrical box, and it'll really explain why we're using specific wires, why we're using specific gauges, and that'll be all in the explanation of the actual electrical box. So don't get too worried about that stuff right now. Just figure out what components you're using and how much amperage you're gonna need. So we'll go through and I'll give you guys a list of proper wire sizes for specific components, and that will be inside of a link within this course. This is what is called 12-2. So there's a protective sheathing in here. It's a stranded wire, so it's flexible, and that's important. You don't want to use solid core wire passing through all these metal pieces because they just vibrate and they can potentially cut. But you have a single strand, and within that, you have we use this as our ground, and then this is our positive. So 12-2, pretty simple, marine grade stuff. And then here, we have our 18 gauge, and you can see it's much smaller. So this is what we're gonna wanna run with lights and stuff like that, things with low power draw or amperage. But again, everything is contained within this nice clean little sheath, and then you just strip that stuff out, You connect your parts right into these two little wires.